My name is Charlotte Kensington. I'm 31 years old and I work as a data analyst in Austin. My life runs on structure, spreadsheets, predictable schedules, quiet routines that don't leave much room for chaos. I've always believed that if you plan well enough, most problems never get the chance to exist. That was true long before Daniel. Daniel Hayes is 29, my boyfriend, or at least he was. We had been together for a little over 2 years. We didn't officially live together, but I was at his apartment most weeks. We had routines that felt permanent, conversations about engagement that felt like they were just waiting for the right moment. On paper, everything made sense. Same stage of life, similar long-term goals, no obvious incompatibilities. From the outside, we looked stable. Daniel had a way of making things look easy, confident, charming, the kind of man who could say something sharp and still have people laugh like it was harmless. At the beginning, I thought it was just his personality. Then I started noticing the pattern. It wasn't what he said, it was who he said it to. Waiters, customer service staff, his younger cousin, my sister, anyone he thought had less leverage in the room. That edge in his tone, subtle, controlled, just enough to make the other person uncomfortable without giving them anything concrete to push back on. With me, it showed up differently. Less obvious, more precise. If I made plans confidently, he'd say I was controlling. If I asked for his input, he'd say I lacked initiative. If I did something thoughtful, he'd question my motives. If I kept things simple, he'd call me emotionally distant. Every conversation felt like it ended with me explaining intentions I never had. And somehow, I stayed. Because the overall picture still looked right. Because walking away from something that made sense on paper felt irrational. By early December, I had already decided I was going to propose. Nothing dramatic, no grand gestures, just something quiet, intentional, certain. I had a ring picked out, deposit already paid. I had even started preparing for Christmas with his family. It would be the first time I spent the holiday with them. His mother loved hand-painted ornaments from local artists. His father collected vintage jazz records. I found both, carefully, without asking Daniel for help. The gifts were already wrapped, sitting in the trunk of my car. That was the same week everything started to feel off. It wasn't obvious at first, just small things. Every time I brought up Christmas plans, Daniel would shift. Not angry, not defensive, just evasive. He'd change the subject, give vague answers, act like I was overthinking basic logistics. Questions like what time we were leaving, whether I should pack overnight. Normal questions. Then came the phone calls. He started stepping into other rooms to answer them. At first, I ignored it. Then I asked if something was wrong. That's when he snapped. Not loudly, just enough to make it clear I had crossed some invisible line. 3 days before Christmas, everything finally made sense. I had just come over after work, brought takeout, nothing unusual. We were sitting in his living room, halfway through a conversation that had nothing to do with anything important. And then he said it. Completely out of nowhere. You should probably make other plans for Christmas. I remember blinking, trying to catch up to what he meant. I thought maybe his family had changed locations, or plans had shifted. So I asked him what he meant. That's when he said it. He told me I couldn't come to Christmas dinner this year because his ex-girlfriend would be there, and it would be awkward. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. Calm, casual, almost bored. My brain needed a few seconds to process it. 2 years. 2 years together. And somehow I was the one being removed. I asked the obvious question. Why would his ex be at his family's Christmas? He shrugged slightly. Said she was still close with his sister. That the family had known her for years, that she still showed up sometimes, like it was normal, like I was supposed to accept that without question. Then he added the part that changed everything. It'll just be easier if you don't come this year. It might make her uncomfortable. Her. Not his parents. Not him. Her. The woman he dated before me. The woman he broke up with over 2 years ago. Her comfort mattered more than my presence. I asked him if he was serious. He rolled his eyes, told me I was making it bigger than it needed to be, said it was just one holiday, said I could spend Christmas with my own family, Said next year would probably be different. Next year. Like I was supposed to quietly step aside and wait my turn in his life. I could feel something shifting inside me. Not anger. Something quieter. Something colder. Because suddenly, everything started lining up. All the small moments I had ignored. All the subtle ways he kept me off balance. This wasn't new. It was just the first time it was this obvious. So I asked him one simple question. Do you actually expect me to step aside for your ex after 2 years? He sighed like I was exhausting. Called me insecure. Dramatic. Said I was proving his point. That word again. Insecure. That's when it clicked. Not emotionally. Logically. Clean. Simple. He had already decided where I stood. And once you understand your position in someone's priorities, there's nothing left to negotiate. I stood up. He didn't even react at first. Just watched me like I was about to prove something. I grabbed my charger from the counter, my gym bag, a couple of shirts from his closet. It took less than 5 minutes. That's when he finally asked what I was doing. I looked at him. Calm. The relationship is over. He laughed. Actually laughed. Like I had just made a joke. Told me to relax. Said I was overreacting. That I'd cool off and call him later. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just kept packing. Before I left, I picked up the gift bag by the door. The one with his parents' Christmas presents. That's when he frowned. Confused. Why are you taking those? I paused for a second. Then I told him the truth. Because they weren't meant for someone who thinks their ex matters more than their partner. And then I walked out. But I didn't go home. Not yet. Because if his ex was important enough to still be part of his family's Christmas, then his family deserved to know exactly why I wouldn't be there. I didn't drive home. I drove to his parents' house. The entire way there, my mind was unusually quiet. No spiraling thoughts. No second guessing. Just a steady, almost clinical sense of clarity. The relationship had ended less than 30 minutes ago, and yet it didn't feel chaotic. It felt resolved. His parents lived about 20 minutes outside the city, in a quiet neighborhood. One of those places where everything looks settled, like nothing unexpected ever happens there. I had been there a few times before. Dinner, birthdays, small, polite conversations that made everything feel normal. Pulling into their driveway felt surreal, like I had stepped into a version of the evening that wasn't supposed to exist. I sat in the car for a moment, hands still on the wheel, not to gather courage, just to make sure I stayed exactly as I was. Calm, clear, unemotional. I grabbed the gift bags from the passenger seat and walked up to the door. His dad answered. He looked surprised, but not concerned. "Charlotte," he said, stepping aside automatically. "Hey, come in." Like it was any other visit, like nothing had already ended. His mom was in the kitchen. She turned when she heard my voice and smiled the same way she always did. Warm. Familiar. For a brief second, I almost wondered if Daniel had already called them, but that illusion disappeared quickly. The confusion showed up the moment they realized I was alone. "Where's Daniel?" his mom asked, wiping her hands on a towel. I set the gift bags down gently by the table. "He's at the apartment," I said. "I came by myself. I just needed to explain something before Christmas." That got their attention immediately. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I had laughed with them a few weeks earlier, the same place where I had imagined sitting as part of their family. I kept my voice even. "I won't be at Christmas this year," I said. His mom frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" I didn't rush it. "Daniel told me earlier tonight that his ex-girlfriend will be there," I continued, "and that it would be better if I didn't come, so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable." Silence. Not dramatic. Just still. His dad leaned back slightly, like he needed physical space to process what I had just said. His mom blinked. Once. Twice. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Yes." I didn't soften it, didn't reframe it. Just the facts. "And because of that," I added, "I ended the relationship about 30 minutes ago." I said it the same way I had said it to Daniel. Flat. Final. His dad rubbed his forehead slowly. "Wait," he said. He actually said her comfort was the reason? Those were essentially his words. Another pause. Longer this time. He looked at his wife, then back at me. I could see the shift happening in real time. Not anger. Something closer to disappointment. Confusion first, then recognition. I slid the gift bags across the table toward them. I had already bought your Christmas presents earlier this week, I said. Returning them didn't feel right. None of this is your fault. His mom immediately shook her head. Oh no, Charlotte, you don't have to. It's okay, I said gently. They were meant for you. She hesitated, then slowly pulled the bags closer, not smiling anymore, just quiet. The room settled into that same stillness again. Then his dad asked something that shifted the entire direction of the conversation. Does Daniel know you're here right now? I shook my head. No, I came straight from his place. That answer seemed to land differently. He didn't look upset. If anything, he looked tired, like something had just confirmed a suspicion he hadn't fully voiced before. His mom leaned forward slightly. I don't understand, she said. Why would he prioritize his ex over someone he's been with for 2 years? I met her eyes. I don't know, I said honestly. Then I added carefully, the part that bothered me most wasn't even that she was there. If your family has known her for years, that's your decision. I'm not here to tell anyone who they can invite into their home. They both listened, focused. But asking me to remove myself from the situation entirely, instead of expecting her to handle a little discomfort? I paused briefly. That told me everything I needed to know. His dad nodded slowly, once. Then he exhaled. There's something you should probably know, he said. And just like that, the entire situation shifted. He glanced at his wife before continuing. She hasn't been coming around as much this past year, he said. Things got a little awkward after Daniel started bringing you to family events. I felt my chest tighten slightly, not emotionally, just awareness sharpening. So I have to ask, I said. Did Daniel ask you to invite her this year? They looked at each other. A silent exchange. Then his mom answered, yes. One word, simple. But it changed everything. She called a few weeks ago, she continued, said she felt bad that her ex would be alone for Christmas, asked if we could include her. Her. Not him. Her. For a second, I didn't say anything, because there was nothing left to clarify. The situation he had described as unavoidable, he created it. Deliberately. And then solved it by removing me. The math was incredibly simple. His dad looked down at the gifts on the table, then back at me. I appreciate you coming here and telling us directly, he said. And for what it's worth, I think you handled this better than most people would. I gave a small nod. There wasn't really anything to argue about, I said. And I meant it. Because once something becomes that clear, emotion doesn't change the outcome. I stood up. Not abruptly, just done. Right as I reached for my coat, his mom's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, then looked at me. Her expression shifted. Subtle, but unmistakable. It's Daniel, she said quietly. Of course it was. Timing like that almost felt scripted. I didn't hesitate. It's probably better if you take that without me here, I said. She nodded slowly. His dad walked me to the door. Before I stepped out, he paused, then extended his hand. I'm sorry it turned out like this, he said. I shook it. Me too, I replied. Then I added, without thinking too much about it, but once someone shows you where you stand, it's not complicated anymore. He didn't argue, didn't correct me, just nodded. I walked out, got into my car, and drove home. The first thing I did when I stepped into my apartment was block Daniel's number. Not out of anger, just practicality. There was no version of the next conversation that would improve anything. Only arguments. Rewriting. Deflection. I blocked him on everything else, too. Social media. Messaging apps. Anywhere he could reach me. Clean. Final. Then I handled the last loose end. The ring. I hadn't picked it up yet, but I had already paid a deposit at a local jeweler. The rest was scheduled for the following week. It would have been ready just before New Year's. The next morning, before work, I drove straight there. The store was quiet, soft lighting, glass cases, everything calm in a way that felt almost ironic. I explained the situation simply. The engagement had been called off. Could the deposit be refunded? Fortunately, their policy allowed cancellations before completion. It wouldn't be immediate, but the money would be returned within a few business days. I thanked them, walked out, and stood there for a second in the parking lot. 3 days earlier, I had been planning a proposal. Now, the ring didn't even exist anymore. For a moment, it felt strange, like I had skipped an entire version of my life. But the feeling passed quickly, because the more I replayed that conversation in my head, the clearer it became. I hadn't lost anything real. I had just stopped investing in something that never actually existed the way I thought it did. And after that, everything went quiet. The next couple of months were quiet, not empty, not lonely, just steady. Work picked up at the start of the year, which helped. Data analysis projects tend to come in waves, and our company had just rolled out a new reporting system that kept me busy most days. There's something grounding about structured problems. Clean inputs, clear outputs. No hidden agendas. Outside of work, I started reconnecting with people I hadn't seen much while I was with Daniel. Not because he ever explicitly stopped me, but because everything with him required adjustment. Timing, mood, energy. Without that constant recalibration, my weeks felt open again, simpler. Around early March, I met someone new. His name was Adrian Cole. He was 30, a physical therapist. We met through a mutual friend at a small birthday dinner. Nothing dramatic, no immediate spark that felt overwhelming. Just easy conversation, the kind that doesn't require effort to maintain. We talked again a few days later. Then again the week after that. What stood out about Adrian wasn't intensity. It was the absence of friction. No subtle corrections about how I phrased things. No strange push-pull dynamic. No sense that I was being evaluated while we were just talking. If we disagreed on something, it stayed a disagreement. It didn't turn into a reflection of my personality. We took things slowly. Dinner, walks, conversations that didn't feel like negotiations. By the time April came around, we were seeing each other regularly. And that's apparently when Daniel found out. I didn't know exactly how. We didn't share many close mutual friends. My best guess was social media. Adrian had posted a photo from a hiking trail just outside the city. Nothing significant. Just the two of us, standing next to each other, smiling. Normal. But somehow, that photo made its way back to Daniel. I didn't realize anything was happening at first, until one of my friends texted me, "Hey, are you okay?" That alone felt strange. I asked why. He sent me a screenshot. It was from Daniel's Instagram story, and it wasn't subtle. A long paragraph about how some people jump into new relationships immediately after a breakup because they're emotionally weak. A line about how some people pretend to be calm and logical, but are actually avoiding accountability. He didn't use my name, but he didn't need to. The timing made it obvious. At first, I ignored it. Daniel had always liked indirect commentary. Even when we were dating, he would post vague quotes after arguments. Things about emotional intelligence, maturity, people revealing their true character, always designed so that the right people would understand. But this time, it escalated. Over the next few days, the posts multiplied. Longer, sharper, more frequent, multiple times a day. Paragraphs about betrayal, about people who construct a calm exterior to hide manipulation, about how some women unknowingly date people who are emotionally calculating. Still no name. But now, there were details. References to Christmas. Comments about someone walking away right before the holidays. That's when people started sending me screenshots. Not because they believed him, because they were confused. I still didn't respond. There was nothing to respond to. Anyone who actually knew me already understood what had happened. And I wasn't interested in turning my personal life into a public argument. But Daniel wasn't done. The tone shifted again, from vague to personal. He started posting videos, talking directly to the camera, frustrated, defensive, explaining his version of relationships. How some people avoid accountability by pretending everything is a logical decision. At one point, he said, "Some people think being calm means they're right." That one made its way back to me almost immediately. Still, I said nothing because the reality was simple. He asked me to step aside for his ex. I ended the relationship. That was the entire story. But Daniel couldn't accept that version. And eventually, he crossed a line he couldn't walk back from. One night, he posted something different. Not just commentary. A claim. A long paragraph about how he had been abandoned 3 days before Christmas, about how he had been planning to introduce his girlfriend to his family, and she had suddenly disappeared after a minor disagreement. That detail, 3 days before Christmas, made it obvious, not just to me, to everyone, because it wasn't vague anymore. It was specific. And specific invites questions. People started asking, not aggressively, just logically. What happened? Why would someone leave that suddenly? Was there more to the story? At first, Daniel tried to control it. More posts, more explanations, longer captions. But the more he said, the more the gaps became visible. Then someone asked a simple question in the comments. If everything was fine, why was your ex at Christmas? The comment sat there for a while. Then he replied. And that reply ended everything. He said, "Because my family has known her longer, and it would have been unfair to make her uncomfortable by bringing someone new." Someone new. 2 years. Reduced to someone new. That was all it took. Within minutes, more questions appeared. Not hostile, just precise. If she was new, why were you together for 2 years? Why would the ex take priority? Why not just invite both? No one needed to argue. The logic did the work. Within an hour, the post was gone, deleted. The next morning, his account was private. And just like that, the narrative he had been building collapsed quietly. Completely. For a while after that, everything went silent again. And I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because about 2 weeks later, Daniel decided to try something else. He showed up in person. It was a Tuesday, later than usual. Most people had already left the office. The parking lot behind the building was nearly empty. Just a few scattered cars under dim overhead lights. I was walking toward mine, keys already in my hand, when I heard my name, Charlotte. I stopped, turned, and there he was, Daniel, standing near the edge of the lot like he had been there for a while. For a second, I didn't react, not out of shock, more recognition, like seeing something I had already processed, just appearing again in front of me. He started walking toward me immediately. No hesitation, no awkward pause, just straight into conversation. "I've been trying to talk to you," he said. His tone was different. Not the sharp, controlled edge I remembered. This was strained, defensive, like he had already had this conversation in his head multiple times and was trying to land it correctly. I didn't move closer, didn't step back. I just stood there. "You blocked me everywhere," he continued. "Yes," I said. No explanation, no apology. Just the answer. That seemed to irritate him. A flicker of it crossed his face before he pushed past it. "People have been asking questions," he said, "about what happened." I didn't respond. He kept going. "And the way it's being talked about," he paused, choosing his words, "it's not accurate." There it was. Not concern. Not closure. Control. I looked at him. "What part isn't accurate?" I asked. He exhaled sharply. "The way people are describing the Christmas situation," he said. "It makes it sound like I chose my ex over you." I held his gaze. That's exactly what happened. The words landed clean. No emphasis. No emotion. Just fact. His jaw tightened. "That's not fair," he said quickly. "It was more complicated than that." I didn't interrupt. I already knew the pattern. He continued. "It was an awkward family dynamic," he said. "I was trying to manage it without making things worse." "By removing me," I said. He hesitated, then pushed forward. "I asked you to be flexible," he said. It was one holiday. There it was again. Minimization, reframing, turning a decision into a misunderstanding. I felt something settle inside me, not frustration, just confirmation. Nothing had changed. Months had passed. Public fallout, embarrassment, and he was still telling the same story, still trying to adjust the framing instead of acknowledging the choice. I shook my head slightly. If you ask your partner to step aside so your ex can feel comfortable, I said, calm, steady, the relationship is already over. He stared at me, like he was waiting for something else, a softening, a reconsideration. It didn't come. That's your interpretation, he said. No, I replied. That's the situation. Silence stretched between us. Not tense, just finished. He shifted his weight slightly, looked around the empty parking lot like he was searching for a different angle. You didn't even try to work through it, he said finally. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. I did, I said, for 2 years. That one landed. He didn't respond immediately, because there wasn't a clean way to argue with it. So he tried something else. You just walked away, he said. Yes. No hesitation, no apology, just the truth. And now you're with someone else, he added, the edge creeping back into his voice. I didn't confirm it. It didn't matter. That's not the point, he said quickly, like he had realized where that line of conversation would go. The point is, people think I did something wrong. I looked at him for a long second. Then I said the only thing that actually mattered. You did. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just accurate. His expression shifted again. Frustration, now, mixed with something sharper. You're letting them believe a false version of the story, he said. I didn't tell anyone anything, I replied. That stopped him. Because it was true. Everything that had come out came from him, his posts, his words, his explanations. You didn't correct it, he said. There was nothing to correct. Another silence. This one heavier, because now the conversation had nowhere left to go. No angle, no leverage, just reality. I adjusted my grip on my keys. I think we're done here, I said. He stepped forward slightly. Charlotte, I didn't let him finish. Take care of yourself, Daniel. Calm, polite, final. I walked past him, didn't look back, didn't wait for a response, just kept moving. By the time I reached my car, I could feel his presence still behind me, standing there, unresolved, but not my responsibility anymore. I got in, closed the door, and drove away. The interesting part wasn't the conversation. It was what came after, or more accurately, what didn't. No messages, no new posts, no attempts to reach out again. Just silence. For the first time since everything started unraveling, Daniel disappeared completely. And that silence felt different. Not tense, not waiting for something to happen, just empty. Like whatever version of the story he had been trying to maintain had finally run out of space to exist. Life settled again. Work stayed steady. My routines held. And Adrian stayed exactly who he had been from the beginning. Consistent, not performative, not strategic. Just present. There were no invisible rules, no constant recalibration, no subtle tension underneath normal conversations. If something bothered him, he said it directly, without turning it into something else. If something bothered me, I said it, and it stayed what it was. A conversation, not a test. That difference. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel intense, but it was noticeable in the smallest ways. Like not having to think about how a sentence might be interpreted before saying it. Like making plans without expecting them to be questioned or reframed. Like existing without being evaluated. It sounds simple, but after 2 years of something else, it wasn't. One night in late spring, Adrian and I were sitting outside after dinner. Nothing special. Just a quiet evening. And he asked me something that caught me off guard. Can I ask you something? I nodded. What actually happened with your last relationship? Not intrusive, not suspicious. Just curious. I thought about it for a second. Not because I didn't know the answer, because I wanted to say it correctly. Then I told him, simply. He asked me not to come to Christmas so his ex wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Adrian blinked. Once. Then leaned back slightly. And that was it? That was it. No added details. No long explanation. Because there wasn't one. He let out a small breath. Not dramatic. Just processing. Okay, he said. And that was the end of it. No analysis. No follow-up questions. No attempt to unpack it into something more complicated, because it wasn't complicated. And that was the moment something became very clear. The relationship didn't end because of Christmas. It didn't end because of one conversation. It ended because that conversation revealed something that had been there the entire time. A hierarchy I had ignored, a pattern I had explained away, a version of reality that only worked as long as I kept adjusting to it. And once I stopped adjusting, there was nothing left holding it together. The mistake wasn't leaving. The mistake was almost staying. Looking back now, the most surprising part isn't how it ended. It's how long it took me to see it clearly. Because once I did, the decision wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. Clean. Final. And that's the part that Daniel never understood. He thought the relationship ended when I walked out. It didn't. It ended the moment he showed me exactly where I stood and expected me to accept it.